Sydney and Melbourne. I spoke to the Assistant Minister to the Treasurer, Michael Sukkar.
Look, I'm not going to mandate this morning what I think is, an appropriate amount of foreign investment into real estate. We obviously have very, very tight rules and regulations in relation to the investment by foreign individuals into Australian residential real estate, and I'm very fortunate to be working with the Treasurer and Minister for Revenue, who have put in place the most robust screening processes on residential property acquisitions. We've seen the Treasurer announce literally hundreds of millions of dollars of divestments in illegal purchases of foreign property. And let's remember Chris Bowen, when he was Assistant Treasurer, basically opened up the floodgates for foreign investment into Australian residential real estate. So look, Kieran, I'm not going to mandate a number one way or another. Suffice to say, we've got very strong rules that govern the investment in foreigners in residential real estate.
Sure, but you're working on the housing affordability package. I want to ask you, you're working on a housing affordability package in relation to the budget. You talk about the tough rules, but can they be toughened further? For example, when foreigners have been here for 12 months on a visa, they can then buy existing homes. You don't have to buy a new home if a foreigner has been here for 12 months. Should that time be extended, for example, to reduce the pressure on the market, and particularly with first home buyers?
Well, Kieran, there's always a balance of objectives that we want to manage here. On one hand, we are a country that welcomes foreign investment. On another hand, we are a government who says the foreign investment has to be on our terms and it has to be in our national interests. So the budget's a couple of months away. We're reviewing basically everything as it affects the Australian residential property market in formulating our housing affordability package in the budget, but I'm not going to, in a sense, mandate what those measures will be, other than to say we are a government, I think, that has the runs on the board when it comes to imposing our national interest on any investment into Australian residential property by foreign individuals, and it won't be any different. And I can assure you that the housing affordability package in the budget will strike the right balance, noting that there are a number of objectives that we are trying to balance with these things.
Is one of the areas you're looking at those investment properties that are kept vacant? The Telegraph report today quoting experts suggesting a number of these homes that have been bought are remaining vacant. That seems that anecdotal in its reportage this morning. However, the Victorian government recently putting in place a $5,000 tax on the value of investment properties for those that aren't rented out. So there's a perverse incentive, is there not, for those who are negative gearing homes, that they're not necessarily dependent to get renters in there, and also for foreigners who are wealthy enough to keep them vacant. That adds to the cost of rent too, doesn't it?
Well, a couple of points, Kieran. I mean, one of the things that we know is the overwhelming issues with our property market is the lack of supply and our inability to meet demand with that supply. And what we will do in the housing affordability package in the budget is look at ways of really unleashing as much supply as we can. On the second point, we don't, of course, want properties lying vacant. Although, may I add, if a property does lie vacant, my understanding, it would be very difficult to negatively gear that property, because it wouldn't be a property that you're holding for investment purposes. If you're keeping a property empty, you can't negatively gear it. But we don't want any properties empty. Of course, people are able to do what they want with their own assets, but I think moves by some state governments to try and encourage those who hold properties to actually have them tenanted are good in principle. But again, I'm not going to get into what may or may be contained in the budget, other than to say, of course, we want all homes occupied to the extent that there's demand to fill those homes.
The AFR reports this morning that there's speculation within the superannuation industry that there is going to be a move to allow first home buyers to tap into their super. This would be interesting if you did go in that direction, given previous comments from the Finance Minister back in 2014. Matthias Cormann said increasing the amount of money going into real estate by facilitating access to super pre-retirement will not improve housing affordability. It will actually drive up prices even more, he said back in 2014.
Well, Kieran, again, I'm not going to get into specifics other than to say those comments are largely correct in that if all government does is try to pump further liquidity into the residential housing market, then inevitably all you do is push up prices. I mean, well-intentioned though it was, the first home owners grant in effect should have almost been paid straight to property developers, because all it did was basically pump a whole lot of extra money into the market. So anything that you do on the demand side, and I can assure you, anything that we do on the demand side of the ledger in the housing affordability package will be finely calibrated to make sure we're not just, in a sense, lazily pumping more money into the market, because we know, consistent with the Minister for Finance comments, we know that just pushes up prices. So we've got to be a bit more sophisticated about it, and I'm confident we will be.
And the Minister, while we're on, Matthias Cormann also said just a couple of months ago, we went to the last election promising no increases on taxes on investments, specifically no reductions in the capital gains tax discount, no changes to negative gearing. We stick to our commitments. Does that remain current, that view?
Well, look, all I'd add to that, Kieran, is of course we will always stick to our commitments, and one thing that we have said consistently is that we oppose Labor's destructive policies. Labor's policies, masquerading as housing affordability policies, which are just basically housing taxes, will have a trifecta of making it harder for first home buyers, pushing up rents for the 30% of people who rent, and basically reducing investment into the residential real estate market, which means anybody who has a job associated with construction of residential property will be negatively affected here. So it's hard to think of any suite of policies that could more negatively impact those three groups of individuals: first home buyers, renters, and anybody that's associated with the
But the Finance
industry.
Minister was emphatic in suggesting that that's not on the table in capital gains tax, negative gearing. Can you rule out any move in any of those areas of negative gearing or capital gains tax?
Well, Kieran, I've resisted the temptation of ruling anything in or out up until now, and as I said, the budget's 2 months away. There's wild speculation every day. Every day I open up the newspapers, there's about half a dozen new policies that the government is supposedly about to sign off on, or about to tick off on, or about to adopt, many of which are just untrue. But if all I did was confirm one way or another which policies were going to be contained in the housing affordability package, we'd have nothing to announce on the night, Kieran. So I'm not going to get into ruling things in or out.
Let's talk about this other story, reference to you on the front page of the Australian today about the internal fight for the next Victorian Liberal Party president. I'm wondering, has the Prime Minister asked you directly to try and rein this in? Has he spoken to you directly to ease these tensions?
Well, Kieran, I'm not going to engage in this publicly. Obviously, we've got a contested election down here for the president of the Victorian Liberal Party. This is a matter for the branch members historically, and I think up until now, members of Parliament, the parliamentary team, don't really engage in really campaigning one way or another. This is a matter for the members, and I don't think there's a great deal that I can add to it, Kieran, other than to say I am sure the Victorian members will have their say, and it'll be resolved one way or another without any intervention from me or any other members of the parliamentary party.
Yeah, well, the Prime Minister obviously has been engaged by this. He doesn't want Has he asked you to to concentrate on your day job? Is that the message from him?
Well, I haven't seen that it's been a distraction for anybody, and I haven't had those conversations as you've described. We are very focused. I'm, as you'd appreciate, 2 months out from a budget, focused on supporting the Treasurer in putting together a budget, and most particularly focused on putting together our housing affordability package. So I can assure you that takes up 7 days a week of my time, and it doesn't leave much time for all the other internal matters that I know journalists are pretty keen to talk about.